English translation, 439th contact. Monday, 15th January 2007, 00.03 hours.
Oh, there you are. Just now I was telling Bernadette that you might come a minute or two after midnight, or maybe 20 minutes after. But I had to go to the office. And there you are waiting. Be greeted, my friend. I have been waiting for you for quite some time because I am fully loaded with questions that I answered for a bulletin and on which I would like to hear your opinion. Then there are other questions as well. I also want to say right at the beginning that Bernadette told me to give you her regards.
For which I thank you. If you have so many questions, then ask them first before we talk about other things.
Thanks. How many crusades have actually taken place, and what was the reason for the so-called Children's Crusade? Here I have a reader's question.
One question. I looked up the English name of Louis IX in Wikipedia and Encyclopedia. It says that Ludwig IX died during the 8th Crusade against Tunis on 25.8. 1270. In RTDW, it says that he died on the same date during the 7th Crusade. The latter was, however, according to Wikipedia, already in the year 1248. Who is wrong now?
Concerning the so-called Children's Crusade, your father Sfath taught me that these were not really children, but whole families as well as farm workers, servants and day labourers who were poor as mice, which is why the crusade was also called Crusade of the Poor. Sfath also always spoke only of a 1st to 7th Crusade, but never of an 8th Crusade. The 7th Crusade was under the command of Louis IX, who was given the epithet Saint Louis, or Louis the Saint, who also promoted the legal system and enforced, among other things, the prohibitions of divine judgment and feud, in addition to the fact that he appointed the Parliament of Paris as the highest court and central administration. Since you are also concerned with earthly history in general, that is to say also with the events in relation to wars and general human history, etc., I think that you can also give information in this respect, and perhaps a little more than that.
In fact, only 7 crusades have taken place, with King Louis IX taking part in the 6th and 7th crusades. He was born on the 25th of April, 1214, in Poissy, in the region of Yvelines. He served as king from 1226 to 1270, and from 1248 to 1254 he took part in the 6th Crusade, which led across Egypt. And in 1250 he and his army were captured by the Egyptians, but were released by a high ransom. On the 7th Crusade, his life was ended on the 25th of August 1270 before Tunis, and he was canonized on the 25th of August 1297 after the last bastion of Acre was lost in Palestine in 1291. The Teutonic Order, a Christian or spiritual order of knights, since 1230 led a crusade against the pagan Prussians or Prusi, or Old Prussians, and, in vain, against the Lithuanians. The Prussians were Baltic tribes which were settled between the lower Vistula and Memel. The tribes consisted of free peasants who opposed the Christian missionary attempts of the rabid Teutonic Order with great resistance, but were subdued from 1231 to 1283. A further missionary campaign was launched against the Lithuanians, but in vain, as the venture was unsuccessful. The Crusades were carried out with enormous and brutal violence, through murder and manslaughter, torture, and evil massacres, in the name of God, the Lord of love, and Jesus Christ. And so it turned out that here too Christianity was written in blood, for the Crusades alone claimed the lives of some 1.35 million humans. Sustained political successes could not be achieved with the whole murder, nor could a desired unification of the Latin and Byzantine Church be achieved. However, what was created for a long time with a great deal of murder. Torture, manslaughter, robbery, destruction, and bloodshed by the Crusades was the securing of the trade routes of Venice and other Italian city-states and in the eastern Mediterranean. In addition, the Crusades brought about contact with Byzantium and the Islamic world, which created the conditions for the Greek and Oriental sensibilities to become known in the Occident and in Europe, respectively. This, however, was again based on the fact that the Greek and Oriental sensibilities were stolen by the papacy and the Pope's vassals and incorporated into the Vatican. So Christianity, and especially the Vatican, did not shy away from robbing and stealing on a large scale. Now, as for the so-called Children's Crusade, I can only confirm my father Sfath's teaching to you, for the crusade of the poor did not take place through children, for in fact, this claim corresponds to a Christian-made lie and legend. The truth is that poor people such as farmhands, farm women, farm servants, maids, and male and female day laborers from France were led to ruin in 1212, partly with their whole families, consequently also with their children, under the leadership of a farm worker named Stefan Androld, because the Crusade of the Poor, which cannot be called a real crusade, ended in Italy already in autumn 1212. Poor people on the Lower Rhine joined this crusade, led by a young man named Kortzfleisch.
Thanks for explaining. At the 279th official contact conversation on the 3rd of February 2000, the two of us talked together about the Tower of Babylon, and you said that the confusion of language was caused by a natural event. At that time, you explained the following, as it is written in Contact Conversation Volume 8 on pages 107 and 108.
The explanation of the Bible is wrong. In truth, the tower was built by the most diverse groups of people who had many different languages and could communicate with each other only through those who knew the language. When a serious natural event occurred and the different groups of people mixed with each other in fear and panic, it happened naturally that the confused, horrified people fleeing from the building were no longer able to communicate with each other, because no one understood the other language, and each belonged to a different group of people.
What kind of natural phenomenon was that? Perhaps an earthquake? If so, did the 91-meter-high tower not suffer any damage?
In fact, it was an earthquake which also caused severe damage to the tower that was being built. However, this damage was repaired after order was restored to the country.
And what kind of ethnic groups were they that had different languages?
They were different ethnic groups, tribes, and individuals from all surrounding countries, as far as Persia and the Mediterranean. Many were prisoners or slaves, while others from foreign countries were obliged to do slavery work. And all in all, the great mass of the workers had little or no knowledge of their own language, but of the Babylonian language. Babylonians who worked on the construction of the tower were, apart from the architects, construction experts, and supervisors, only those who fell from grace or were convicts. The convicts had the choice of either working on the construction of the tower or being executed, whereby the former was, of course, preferred.
Then there's another question I would like to ask myself. In the Christian world, Emmanuel and the so-called saints are always depicted with halo hanging over their heads. Do you know where this bad habit comes from? Because neither Emmanuel nor any other prophet had such a gloriole over the head.
Even an aureole, with which the whole figure is surrounded in a circle, as well as the almond-shaped medulla, I cannot associate with Emmanuel, Mary, and various saints.
I only know the whole thing from India and the Far East, where the gods and saints have been represented with such garlands of rays since ancient times.
From there, Christianity has also taken over the essence of the glorious beings, in order to give their religious figures a supernatural appearance and to make the believers self-conscious. The garland of lights around a religious figure is to testify to their holiness and spiritual greatness, as well as their heavenly origin and their sublimity above all earthly things.
Then another question that was asked to me on the 2nd of January from the United States, and to which I copied the following from the 424th Contact Report of Saturday, the 17th of June 2006, because I did not know the answer.
That is true. For a long time, we were not in a position to monitor all the flights from foreign countries. However, thanks to our technological innovations, we have now been able to monitor the entire 19th and 20th centuries, as well as the first years of this 21st century, without interruption during the last 3 years. The result of the clarifications is what I told you on my last visit on the 10th of June and now. Actually cited flying apparatuses, ships of extraterrestrial origin since the year 1800 until today, 2006. Exclusively traced back to us Pleiaren and to the 5 other ones mentioned, and now belonging to our Federation, as well as to those whom we could not contact and who remained strangers to us. The matter with Roswell is a different and special case, because at that time, non-human life forms, but bioorganic androids were involved. Also, for the present time, it can be said that if flying apparatuses ships, also telemeter disks, are sighted in the terrestrial airspace, other than of terrestrial origin, these belong only to us Pleiaren and to our federated ones, as well as to the unidentified strangers. No contacts with Earth humans will be made, and apart from the contact between you and us, there are no further contacts. This will only change when other Earth foreigners will openly land on Earth and officially make contact, but this will only happen after we have withdrawn.
So you have said that in the earthly airspace, with regard to extraterrestrial flying objects, only those of you Pleiaren, as well as those of your federated and of the unidentified strangers, can be observed. Is the status still the same? That you still could not identify the strangers, and that they still can be observed in the airspace of the Earth?
Actually, the situation is still the same with regard to the unidentified ones. But we do not try to clarify it anymore, because we have gained knowledge that there is no danger for us or for the Earth humans from these strangers. So we also do not try to disturb their own secrecy and to make ourselves recognizable to them, for which we can also assume with certainty that these strangers have no knowledge of our existence, because we always shield ourselves from them in every respect against sight or location, so only we know of their existence. The alien flying objects can often be observed worldwide by terrestrial human beings because they quite obviously do not have any shielding technology against sight, as is the case with us. What we have also clarified, however, is the fact that these strangers possess the most varied forms of flying objects, but also that they have no contact whatsoever with Earth humans and have never come into direct or indirect contact with such people. And consequently, there can be no reports of the experiences of any Earth humans.
So the unidentified flying objects observed in the last months, insofar as they were of extraterrestrial nature, are thus only a matter of concern to you Pleiaren, your federated and the unidentified strangers, but not to other strangers from space.
That is not correct. No. Because since 1st July 2006, we have extensively shielded our aircraft in order to be able to monitor how often the unidentified strangers can be observed on average in the entire earthly airspace during a year. This is a special investigation which will continue until the 30th of June 2007.
Aha. Then since the 1st of July 2006, all observations of unidentified flying objects, which were probably of extraterrestrial origin, have been flying apparatuses or ships of the unidentified aliens. But one more question. Since when have they been on Earth and flying around in the air?
Looking back into the past, we can see that these aliens have been appearing in the air for several centuries.
This, of course, explains a lot, especially many appearances of UFOs, which could not be assigned to earthly phenomena, as well as not to earthly flying machines, because at that time no such machines existed. Neither did they belong to you, Pleiaren, or your Federation. Because if I take your old explanations into account, you have always been wary of being sighted by people of the Earth. Regarding the unidentified strangers, have you not tried to make contact with them and find out what their mission is here on Earth?
Your words are correct regarding the unidentified flying machines that were observed on the Earth in earlier centuries. With regard to the unidentified aliens, the following must be said. Over the past few years, we have made several attempts to contact them. But according to our control equipment, our signals, for reasons unknown to us, always radiated back to us before they could even reach the direct range of the alien aircraft. From this, we deduced that the strangers were not willing to make contact, so we stopped our efforts to make further contact attempts. And since we only tried to make ourselves noticeable in the form of the signals mentioned above, but not by sighting or locating them, the strangers did not discover our presence so far. As a result of the fruitless attempts of contact on our part, we are not aware of the alien mission. Also, it is only since 1 week that we have known, through further investigations into the past, that these foreigners have been present on Earth for a very long time, and that they appear again and again in such a wise that they can be observed by Earth humans. But as I already explained, there is no proof that they would have come into direct or indirect contact with Earth humans, because for such contacts we did not find any evidence with any Earth humans. These are our latest findings. Nothing else is known to us so far, and we will not make any further attempts to contact them.
There have been reports since July 2006, just since you are completely shielded from detection and visibility, of UFOs that I do not think can be linked to terrestrial aircraft or any other flying devices or to natural terrestrial phenomena.
We are aware of this. And indeed, some of the unidentified flying machines are in some instances a cause of concern to the aliens, while other observations are nevertheless attributable to terrestrial flying machines or natural phenomena.
Thank you. Then I have another bulletin question here, to which I have written an answer that is to be published in Bulletin 62 next December. It is a delicate subject, on which you certainly have more information and knowledge than I do, and on which I would like to know from you whether everything I have written is correct, or whether I need to change or add anything. Maybe everything is a bit too long. If I may read you the whole thing?
Of course.
Now, first the question, then the answer.
Question. Yesterday evening 6 to 1 to 2007, I watched the film Schindler's List, and the question arose again what the motives of the Nazis were for wanting to destroy the Jewish citizens. Such an idea does not come from a beer mood on a whim. There must have been deeper reasons.
Answer. This question cannot be answered with a few words or sentences, because the entire circumstances of the persecution of the Jews and the murder of Jews from time immemorial, as well as the Holocaust in the Nazi Empire, require a longer explanation. The motives of the Nazis were traditional anti-Semitism and hatred against the Jews. Anti-Semitism is based on a dislike and hostility towards the Jews. And since time immemorial, there has even been hatred in play, which was extensively expressed in all possible forms against the Jewish faithful. In this respect, however, the term anti-Semitism is misleading, because as a rule, it does not refer to the community of Semitic peoples, but only to the Jewish people. Originally, The hostility and hatred against the Jews was due to their religious and social segregation in the host countries since they were scattered throughout the world. Through the so-called diaspora Greek for dispersion, a term taken from Hellenistic Jewish literature to refer to a religious, denominational, and/or natural minority and the territory it inhabits. As a result of religious and social segregation, the Jewish minorities had already appeared alien before the establishment of Christianity, which often meant that Jews were only allowed to do work related to money, jewelry and trade, art and literature, etc. From this traditional hostility towards Jews, which must actually be described as anti-Judaism, and to which the persecution of the Jews in the Roman Empire and the fight against Judaism in the Middle Ages belong, it was also derived that from the 13th to the 18th century, the Jews had to wear a Judenkennzeichen, the so-called Judenabzeichen, which served to distinguish them from the rest of the population in public. It was a compulsory badge, for example, a yellow or red spot, ring or star, or the so-called Jewish hat. Also, the funnel-shaped, mostly yellow Jew's hat, which was intended for men, was a sign of Jewish affiliation. In many countries it was worn in the Middle Ages, and after 1215 was prescribed as a Jew's badge. From the 15th century onwards, the Jew's hat was replaced by other forms of headgear. In the Nazi Empire, under National Socialist rule in the Third Reich, the Jewish hat was reintroduced mainly in the form of the Star of David. This anti-Jewishism of the old days must be distinguished from modern anti-Semitism, which was primarily directed against the emancipation of the Jews, legal and social equality since the 18th-19th century. Basically, it was mainly politically and economically justified and used. Since the end of the 19th century, racist anti-Semitism gained increasing political influence, especially in Germany, Austria-Hungary, and also in Eastern Europe. After the end of the First World War, 1914, to 1918, anti-Semitism became an irrational obsession in the broad strata of these countries, and thus the key explanation for the political and social structural crisis. Through the unrestrained agitation of the anti-Semites, people of Jewish origin and tradition gained influence in terms of the economy, money, art, and literature, etc., which was considered corrosive by the anti-Semitic forces. The whole thing represented all forms of capitalism, liberalism, and socialism in the eyes of the anti-Semites only as different manifestations of a targeted, parasitic Jewish infiltration. This anti-Semitism was already violent in its attitude, and as an integral part of the National Socialist ideology of the Third Reich, Germany, it led to a constantly increasing persecution of Jews. The whole thing was connected with the exclusion of the Jews from public life, which ultimately led to the state provocation of pogroms or to looting, devastation of Jewish property, and the murder of the Jews, which ultimately resulted in the final solution of the Jewish question. That is to say, the final solution of the Jewish question. That is to say, the murder of about 4.5 million Jews, and about 2 million other people consisting of Gypsies or Sinti and Roma, as well as of people with mental and physical disabilities at that time called life unfit for life and unworthy of dignity, and of criminals. The whole thing led to the so-called Holocaust, which killed around 6.5 million people, in the Second World War, which claimed around 60 million lives. Even after the Second World War, anti-Semitism as a collective judgment has by no means been overcome worldwide. Since the post-war period, neo-Nazis and other right-wing extremist anti-Semitic groups have been up to their malicious mischief, with these hate monsters being particularly prevalent in the industrialized countries, especially in Germany, Switzerland, Northern Europe, and the USA. These groups destroy Jewish cemeteries as well as other Jewish institutions, in addition to attacking, hurting, crippling, or even murdering Jewish and foreign people. They also disturb peaceful events and sow hatred all around against all people who are not of their own kind. Stalinism has repeatedly and tactically exploited anti-Semitism in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union to purge and discriminate against the opposition. And since 1989 to 92, there has been an alarming resurgence of party political anti-Semitism in the so-called post-communist countries. Anti-Semitism in the Anglo-Saxon countries is of a religious, economic, or socially discriminatory nature. If we look at the Middle East conflict or the Six-Day War of 1967 in the Middle East, we can see that anti-Semitism of its own ideological nature has emerged in the Islamic Arab countries, directed in a struggle of the Arabs against Zionism and the State of Israel. In recent times, however, transitions between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism have also become apparent, although the fact that the motives lead to anti-Semitic consequences, either unconsciously or for ideological reasons, must not be ignored. The term Semites is actually a term that only came into being in the 18th century, which, on the basis of the biblical table of nations, describes a number of peoples as having a common language, namely Semitic. This table of nations is a list of the descendants of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the three sons of Noah, listed in Genesis 10. It is based on the common belief in antiquity that one ancestor stands for each people. Relationships can then be explained genealogically. 71 names of peoples are mentioned in this list, which is intended to give an overview of the peoples known to biblical Israel. The peoples in the north are thus traced back to Japheth, the peoples in the west to Shem, and the peoples in the south to Ham. It is said that 26 peoples went out from Shem, among them the Elamites, Assyrians, Babylonians, and Arameans, etc. But the table of peoples is essentially geographically oriented, according to which the settlement area of the Semites extends from western Anatolia to Persia and from Armenia to the Red Sea. In terms of ethnology, the peoples mentioned do not form closed groups. So the term ethno is graphically unsuitable and, moreover, discredited by its evaluative misuse in 19th and 20th century racial theories, anti-Semitism, and racism. The term can therefore only be applied to the Semitic languages from a linguistic and limited point of view. With regard to the elimination of anti-Semitism, the international treaties and the efforts of the UNO to guarantee human rights serve, among other things, as a basis. In addition, there are also national prohibitions on the different treatment of people on the basis of origin, religion, race, and political opinion. Societies for Christian-Jewish cooperation strive to combat anti-Semitic prejudices at their roots, while various church studies and decisions have attempted to define the relationship between Christians and Jews theologically. Fundamental to the anti-Semitism that emanates from the Christian world and relates to the Jews, many Christians hold them responsible for the crucifixion of Emmanuel, alias Jesus Christ. For this reason alone, they have been stirring up hatred against Judaism since time immemorial. But this is absolutely nonsensical. In truth, Emmanuel was not crucified by the Jews, but through the fault of the chief priests and the Romans who stirred up the people, after which the crucifixion was carried out by the Roman henchmen. Thus, the actual Jewish people did not contribute anything to the crucifixion. Of the pro and hurrah criers of the people, which were under the suggestive influence of the high priests, were there only a few who, moreover, in no way embodied the people. So, in principle, the whole Jewish people cannot be discriminated against and pronounced guilty of the crucifixion of Emmanuel, as has been done since time immemorial, the Catholic Church bearing the main blame for this lie. For it was the Catholic Church that brought this slander of the alleged guilt of the Jews into the world. The truth is also that the Romans saw Emmanuel's teaching as revolutionary, and for this reason alone they intended to condemn him and hand him over to crucifixion, which they did with the help of the Jewish high priests. Well, The history of the origin of the people of Israel leads far back to the Hebraeans and the ancient Hebrews who came out of them, who were not exactly saints as a whole, and who conquered Palestine out of it with evil acts of war and murder. But this is already thousands of years ago and has nothing to do with the crucifixion of Emmanuel, which was unjust in one way or another, and which, as I said, was not to be attributed to the Jewish people, but to their high priests and the Romans. Like all true prophets who brought the teaching of the Spirit, or the teaching of the truth, or the teaching of the life to the respective people, Emmanuel was also a revolutionary, who of course was not appreciated either by the Romans or by the chief priests. Emmanuel's teaching was the teaching of peace, freedom, love, and harmony, as well as the carrying of one's own responsibility, leaving out religion. This, of course, did not suit either the chief priests or the Romans in their dirty business, so that the revolutionary and blasphemer they hated had to disappear from the scene, which was to happen by crucifixion. At least that was what they hoped. But they did not expect that Emmanuel was only deeply unconscious when he was taken down from the cross so that he could flee to Syria and later to India. Many Jewish believers who had taken pleasure in his teaching helped him in this, and there were many of them. What is happening in Israel today with regard to the warlike and murderous machinations against the Palestinians cannot be blamed on the entire Israeli people. For it is truly only the powerful of the country and their supporters who are to blame for everything and who stir up murder and destruction. In Israel, as in all countries of the world, the rational part of the population wants to live in peace, love, freedom, and harmony, but is shouted over and suppressed by the murderous and destructive and totally irresponsible elements. That is the way it is everywhere in the world. Consequently, the rational and peace-loving humans do not get a word in edgewise, which is why evil is gaining new power again and again. But this evil is also to be found in anti-Semitism and racism, as well as in xenophobia, which are all idiocies to which only the stupid and ones of low intelligentum can fall prey. And these are the ones who have no idea whatsoever how and why anti-Semitism, racial hatred, and xenophobia came into being in the first place. Because all anti-Semitic, racial, and xenophobic haters clearly and undoubtedly lack the necessary intelligence to grasp and understand the origin and feeble-mindedness of these things. But intellect and rationality cannot be demanded of the feeble-minded and the ones poor in intelligence, because their low intelligentum and dim-wittedness still vegetates in the deepest depths of the intelligence-based mental enfeeblement which is peculiar to brain amputees. If Israel and its murderous, criminal war and terror machinations are to be scolded and condemned, then this does not mean, just as with the USA and other states, the entire population, but only the criminal and irresponsible rulers and their henchmen and supporters, fellow howlers and roarers through whom murder and destruction as well as hardship, roaring misery and war are brought upon other people and nations. It is these miserable creatures, hostile to humans and to life, who in their political as well as religious and sectarian fanaticism and in their lust for power and self-importance bring all evil upon the world. And this is exactly what the righteous Israelis and all other upright Jews living in Jewish tradition are not doing, nor are the consistent believers in Islam, Christians, Hindus, and Buddhists, etc. For this kind of people who cultivate humanity, a lance can be broken. Awry. Throw down the sword's weapons at any time, no matter whether they are Jewish, Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, or Muslim, etc., because in truth it is they who are always striving to bring peace, freedom, love, and harmony, while all the others are only out for death, murder, destruction, ruin, and power. In the same art and wise, kind, and mode, this applies in both relationships to all human beings of all religions, sects, philosophies, and ideologies, so that no nation is exempt from this. But this clearly states that no people may be hated, denigrated, or slandered as human beings in any wise and for any reason. Actions and deeds may be condemned, but they must not cause harm to human life or limb. Anti-Semitism, racial hatred, and xenophobia, however, in their abysmal evil, are based on machinations that do not honor humans as such, but harass, murder, denigrate, and slander them, which is against all human rights. And this also refers to what the Nazis have done to the Jews, but also to what the neo-Nazi pack is criminally organizing against the Jews in our time. But this also applies to all other right-wing extremists who act in the same art and wise, kind and form in their racial and xenophobic hatred. The whole of humanity should finally understand that hatred, revenge, and retribution are in every respect inhuman, just as old things should not be carried into the future again and again by words, machinations, and events. Things that are past belong in the past and must never be ruminated on again in order to make descendants guilty, because they cannot help what their ancestors did. Even what mothers and fathers or brothers and sisters have done only affects them alone, which is why their deeds should not be held against their descendants, etc. Even things that happen in the current, present life and slip into the past should never be brought out again and used as an accusation that goes back. But if a person nevertheless does the same thing, that he or she becomes reproachful with old and past things, then he or she belongs to the group of brain amputees, as well as those who have succumbed to anti-Semitism, racial or xenophobia, vindictiveness, and the urge for revenge. Billy!
What do you think, my friend?
Your explanation is good and corresponds to the facts, and it is certainly not too long. On the contrary, much more could be said. But somehow you have to find an end, because you should only give an answer and not write a novel.
Then I have another question that's been bothering me, and it concerns something very strange. During our conversations, Quetzal, you and I talked about Mount Everest on various occasions, including Sherpa Tenzing Norgay and Edmund Percival Hillary. Piero, Bernadette, Hans Georg, and I have worked through all the contact reports several times. We did that with the overall index as well as with the individual contact reports, but we did not find any information about Tenzing Norgay and Edmund Percival Hillary. Elizabeth and Guido Moosbrugger, as well as Bernadette, are sure that the contact reports mentioned Norgay and Hillary. I also know for my part that Quetzal, you and I really did talk about these men, also in connection with the fact that Hillary and Norgay were only supposedly on the summit of Mount Everest in 1953.
Such conversations actually took place between you and Quetzal and between you and me, so they should be included in the contact conversations.
But that is not the case in the new blocks or the original reports.
This is really very strange. But if you will be patient, I will contact Quetzal right away, who has our original records in safekeeping, which we also use for the correction work with Bernadette and you. Unfortunately, I cannot retrieve those records from here.
Yes, please, ask Quetzal.
It will take some time. Even if Quetzal is reachable at the moment, because it takes about 2 minutes for my questions to reach Quetzal via all relay stations, just as it takes 2 minutes for the answer. It will also take 2 or 3 minutes to find what I want from the original recordings. Then I want to search for the contact I need to make through my flying machine, which I can do from here.
Ptah is still sitting on the sofa and closes his eyes, obviously concentrating, while I remain calm and wait. The whole thing takes about 7 minutes, then he opens his eyes again and talks.
Quetzal is reachable, and he will send me his answer in a few minutes, as soon as he has found the data.
You did all this by way of pure thought swinging waves?
This is the only mode in which I can do it, because everything has to take place through the apparatuses of my flying machine, whose apparatuses are controlled in every respect only by my thought-swinging waves.
As is the case with all your ships, apparatuses, and equipment, unless you wish to handle things manually or acoustically with your voice. In the meantime, until you get Quetzal's answer, I would like to ask you how many continents Era actually consists of, and how high is the highest mountain? Of which I was asked, but did not know the answer. But it is also the case that I am interested in it myself.
Era consists of 2 big continents, one of which you have visited. The highest mountain consists of a volcano that has been extinct for thousands of years and has a height of 26,403 meters.
When I was on Era, I did not see much of the continent. There are certainly islands in the sea, but what about volcanoes? And further, what about seaquakes, earthquakes, and storms? I'm also interested in how old the planet Era actually is. You, who are also a geologist, know that very well.
Of course, on Era there are also various islands in the seas, which we call by different names, just like on the Earth. There are also active volcanoes on both very compact continents, which according to our research have remained the same for about 320 million years and have not undergone any major changes because the tectonic movement is only moderate and does not cause major changes in the event of seaquakes and earthquakes. Moreover, the planet has already calmed down so much in its activity that seaquakes and earthquakes are no longer of great importance to us, quite contrary to those that occur on the Earth. Era itself has an age of 7.2 billion years in relation to the oldest solid matter.
From Florina, I know that the entire planet's surface is 55.7% water surface, and the total land area is 44.3%. The islands are also included in this land area, and I am interested in what percentage of land area they have to be calculated with.
I can answer this question as well. Of the 44.3% land area, 5.7% of the total land area falls to the islands, while the 2 continents have 38.6% land area. And before you ask that, the smaller continent comprises 17.4%, of which 3.1% is mountainous, and the larger continent with 21.2% has 4.2% mountainous.
And can you say what the continents are called?
The big continent is called Gallian, which means the big one, while the small continent is called Saruma, or the fertile one. Ah, Quetzal's answer. Yes, he has found everything. It has been discussed in 3 different conversations. Yes, wait, I will take the answer directly if you want to write it down. Then I will dictate it to you.
Sure, go ahead. The computer is up and running, so I can type everything in right away.
Well, it is 3 short conversations that were made. But it is incomprehensible to me that the notes for this are missing, because they were written down by you, and I also know exactly that we edited them during the joint correction work, therefore Bernadette, you and I. Why they are still missing is beyond me and seems extremely odd. But about those conversations,
223rd Contact Report, the 1st of May, 1988.
When was the first attempt to climb Mount Everest actually made? That was long before Tenzing Norgay and Edmund Hillary climbed the mountain in 1953.
That corresponds to the truthfulness. Our records show that as early as 1873, the first attempt at ascent by locals was made, but it failed miserably. The next attempt was in 1921, from the Tibetan north side of the Rongbuk Glacier. With one exception, however, the attempt remained, as did later expeditions. With regard to Edmund Parsival Hillary and Sherpa Tenzing Norgay, it must be said that, firstly, these 2 were not the first to climb Mount Everest, for that was an Englishman single-handedly in the mid-1920s, and secondly, Norgay and Hillary did not reach the summit of Everest, but turned back just below it, after which they claim to have been at the highest point of the mountain.
260th Contact Report, the 3rd of February, 1998.
Do you know how many expedition attempts were made to climb Mount Everest until 1952, and when actually the ascent began from Nepal, from the southwest front of Everest? I am aware of that. The first expeditions to Mount Everest started in 1950 from the Nepalese Khumbu Glacier, which is located on the southwest front of the mountain. And with regard to the expeditions that took place before the incredible story of Sherpa Tenzing Norgay and Edmund Hillary spread around the world, the 15 of them should be mentioned.
343rd Contact Report, the 3rd of June, 2003.
After Tenzing Norgay and Edmund Parsival Hillary, who allegedly reached the summit of Mount Everest on May 29, 1953, precisely because they were not actually at the top and turned back shortly before the finish, which Tenzing Norgay denied until his death in 1986, and Edmund Hillary still denies, others actually climbed the mountain to the summit. Was it really the case that it was Swiss people who really reached the summit of Mount Everest for the first time? Just when I disregard the Englishmen who single-handedly reached the summit in the mid-1920s, as Quetzal once said.
You are correctly informed, because the real first ascent applies to a Swiss expedition that climbed Mount Everest to the summit with 2 rope teams on the 23rd and 24th of May 1956. That is, if we disregard the Englishman's ascent in the mid-1920s, which unfortunately can hardly be proven by terrestrial means, because the man plummeted down and remained lost. Since the Swiss climbed Everest, the whole thing has become an everyday occurrence, as the mountain itself was conquered by a woman, a Japanese woman named Junko Tabei, on the 16th of May, 1975. These are the complete data that Quetzal has now sent me from our original records. It is completely puzzling to me that these are no longer in your original reports, nor in the new conversation blocks, because we, you, Bernadette, and I corrected everything together. It is really very strange, as you said.
As I was saying, Bernadette and Guido and Elizabeth remember these things being discussed just as you and I do. And also Simone. She was in the kitchen when I was still over there with Bernadette before midnight. Because she came with Stefan to the night watch. Said that she knew exactly that she had read these things in the contact reports. Strange about the whole thing is also that in my original reports and in the new conversation blocks, the sentence numbering is correct overall, so nothing indicates that anything is missing.
This is a riddle I cannot solve. Apparently, the whole thing is connected to all the extremely strange and mysterious events in the center that have been going on for years, and which we have not been able to solve so far.
Maybe time is working for us.
From the looks of things, it is doubtful. But now, dear friend, I have to go away and devote myself to a task, after which I will return, which, however, will be at 23 hours tomorrow night at the earliest.
Okay, but then I definitely have something confidential to discuss with you, which concerns group members, although I will not openly name names. However, I have already given some advice and arranged something, but I would like to discuss it with you.
That is how it should be. Until then, goodbye.
See you. Take care.
2307 hours.
Hello, there you are, Ptah. Can we get right to what I have to talk to you about?
Of course. Be greeted, Edward.
Well, here's the thing.
The advice you have given is absolutely correct, as is the action you have taken. This whole thing could have been avoided if your advice had been followed years ago. Although it was partly carried out. After which there was an improvement. Everything was soon undone, so that in a short time everything was back in the old forms, which was to be expected under the given circumstances. I need you to speak to again and make it clear that there will never be an improvement unless the final step you have advised is taken. If this is not done, then it will be impossible for everything to work out for the better, because the whole evil is already so advanced that, as you often say, the last pinch of the scourge is nearly used up, and only by a radical measure a new one can be applied. The whole thing also requires the following changes regarding the services in the center, which you should arrange immediately. In addition to these things, you should also say that you should quickly arrange and discuss everything. So that you can inform me what is going on, I will come back tomorrow, because I feel the need to get involved in these matters and, if necessary, to give advice.
Thank you. I also feel the need to get the whole thing sorted out, and so I will talk to everyone you mentioned. I am sure they will all understand the matter and what it involves, and will give the right understanding and consequently act correctly.
That can be assumed. But now, Edward, my friend, we should finish our official conversation, so that we can talk privately and play another game of chess.
Oh, I thought you still had some predictions.
There is not much to report that will happen until February 3rd, because then I will visit you again. Tomorrow, when I come back, I will tell you what else needs to be mentioned concerning predictions. Now, let us move on to the private.